Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we are going to be looking at some really interesting stuff that you sent over. It's a collection of YouTube videos with Abraham Hicks, and they're talking about well-being and healing.
Yeah.
And these videos offer a pretty unique perspective. You know, usually we think about healing as fixing something that's like wrong with us.
Yeah.
But these videos suggest that we should actually be aligning with our inner being to allow well-being to just happen naturally.
It is a really interesting way to think about it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of like a total flip of the script on how we normally approach health.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, what if instead of constantly monitoring and controlling our bodies, we could see them as powerful allies that already know how to heal themselves?
Exactly. And one of the key ideas that comes up a lot is this concept of source energy.
Yeah.
It's like this pure positive energy that is like our natural state, our default setting, if you will.
You know, I've definitely heard of source energy before, but I'm still a little fuzzy on what it actually is. It almost sounds a bit mystical.
Well, you could think of it like this. Imagine a cork bobbing in water. No matter how many times you push it down, it always wants to pop back up to the surface.
Okay.
And that's kind of like us and source energy.
Yeah.
We're constantly being drawn back to this state of well-being. It's just our natural tendency.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So if well-being is our natural state, then why do we experience so much, not well-being?
Well, that is where things get really interesting, because Abraham Hicks talks a lot about how our beliefs can actually create resistance to this natural flow of well-being. And they call them thoughts that hinder the outcome that you're reaching for.
So our own thoughts can actually block us from experiencing well-being. That's a pretty huge idea.
It is, and it's
Yeah.
something that we can all relate to,
There
right?
you go.
Like, think about how easily we can get caught up in those negative thoughts or those worries.
Yeah.
And those thoughts have a real impact on our energy and our overall well-being.
You mentioned earlier that these beliefs hinder the outcome that we're reaching for. What does that mean?
Okay, so picture this. You have this pile of sticks, okay? And each stick represents a different subject or area of your life. Now you have the choice to focus on the stick that feels the best to you, the one that makes you happy, the one that brings you joy and excitement.
Okay.
And by focusing on that one positive stick, you actually influence the energy of the whole pile, the whole bunch of sticks.
So instead of dwelling on, what's wrong or what we are lacking, we can shift our attention to what feels good, and that positive energy kind of ripples out into other areas of our lives. I like that. Seems way less heavy.
Exactly. And that's what's so exciting about this perspective. It's not about forcing ourselves to change or, trying to fix everything that's wrong.
Right.
It's about gently shifting our focus.
Yeah.
Choosing thoughts that feel good and just allowing that natural flow of well-being to take over.
I think I'm starting to get this, but we're not just talking about positive thinking here, right? It seems like it's a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, you're right. It's more than just thinking positive thoughts. It's really about aligning our energy with source energy, with that natural state of well-being that is always available to us.
So how do we actually do that? How do we align our energy with source energy?
Well, one of the first steps is to just become aware of those beliefs that might be blocking that alignment. And sometimes those beliefs are so ingrained, like they're so much a part of our everyday thinking that we don't even realize that they're Abraham Hicks calls those ingrained beliefs wonky calibrations.
Wonky calibration? What are wonky calibrations? I'm picturing a compass that's pointing in the wrong direction.
That is a great analogy. So wonky calibrations are basically these patterns of beliefs and expectations that we have kind of picked up along the way a lot from our childhood or past experiences. And they may have served us at one point, but they may not be serving us anymore.
So how do we know if we have any of these wonky calibrations? And how do we fix them?
That is where paying attention to our feelings and our bodies comes in. Remember, Abraham Hicks emphasizes that we are vibrational beings. We're not just physical bodies, we're also energy.
Okay, so mind-body connection. I've definitely heard of that. But what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, think about it this way. Your body is constantly giving you feedback. It's sending you signals about how you're feeling. Like if you're feeling stressed or anxious, your body might tense up. Your heart rate might increase. You might get a headache. Those are all physical manifestations of your energy being out of alignment.
So our bodies are constantly reflecting our energy back to us. It's like a built-in feedback system.
Exactly. And the more that we can tune into those signals, the more we can start to identify those wonky calibrations, those beliefs that are causing our energy to feel off.
That makes a lot of sense. But how do we actually shift those beliefs? It seems like some of them can be pretty deeply rooted.
It's not about forcing ourselves to change overnight. It's a gentle process of just becoming aware of those beliefs, and then choosing thoughts that feel better, thoughts that are more in alignment with source energy.
So instead of like beating ourselves up for having negative thoughts, we can just acknowledge them and then choose to focus on something that feels more positive.
Precisely. And the more we practice this, the more natural it becomes. It's like we're retraining our brains to focus on well-being rather than lack or negativity.
This is so fascinating. It feels like a completely different way of approaching health and well-being.
It is a paradigm shift, and one of the most exciting aspects of this perspective is how it changes our relationship with our bodies. Instead of seeing our bodies as something that we need to constantly control or fix, we can start to see them as wise and resilient partners in our journey to well-being.
I love that idea. Instead of fighting against our bodies, we can learn to trust their innate wisdom and work with them to create a state of true well-being.
Exactly. And we'll dive deeper into this concept of trusting our bodies in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, awesome. I am excited to hear more about this.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back, everyone. I don't know about you, but all this talk about source energy and wonky calibrations has really got me thinking about well-being in a whole new way.
It's definitely a powerful shift in perspective. Remember, we were talking about how our bodies are constantly giving us feedback, about our energy and our alignment with source energy.
Right. It's like our body is this incredible feedback system, always letting us know if we're on track or if something's a bit off.
Exactly. And one area where this feedback system can be particularly loud is when it comes to cravings and addictions.
Oh, this is something I definitely struggle with, whether it's that extra cup of coffee or getting sucked into social media. It feels like I'm constantly battling some kind of craving.
Well, what's fascinating here is that Abraham Hicks approaches addiction from a really different angle than what we usually hear. Instead of seeing it as this moral failing or a lack of willpower,
Right.
they actually suggest that addiction is a natural response to vibrational imbalance.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So it's not about just like white-knuckling our way through those cravings.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Think back to that example we talked about in the last part, introducing a substance to the body like caffeine or cigarettes.
Yeah.
Your body's cells actually adjust to compensate for that substance, and that's what creates the craving.
Yeah, it's not just in our heads. It's an actual physiological response happening at a cellular level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how our bodies work, isn't it? And what's even more interesting is that Abraham Hicks suggests that if we could refrain from reintroducing that substance for just 3 days, those cravings would actually subside naturally.
3 days? That seems surprisingly manageable.
It is. But here's the key. It's not just about the physical aspect. We also need to address the underlying energy imbalance, the emotional component
Right.
that might be contributing to those cravings in the first place.
So instead of just trying to fight the craving, we need to kind of understand why we are reaching for that substance or behavior in the first place.
Exactly. What void are we trying to fill? What need are we trying to meet? Maybe we're seeking comfort, connection, or a sense of escape.
So instead of judging ourselves or feeling guilty about having cravings, maybe we can approach it with a bit more curiosity and compassion.
Absolutely. It's about understanding that we're all seeking well-being, even if we're going about it in ways that aren't ultimately serving us.
I'm starting to see how this perspective can take a lot of the pressure off. Instead of trying to force ourselves to change, we can focus on understanding ourselves better and addressing those underlying issues that are driving those cravings.
Exactly. And once we start to address those underlying issues, those cravings naturally start to diminish.
This is making me think about all the different ways we try to control our bodies and our desires. It seems like we're often fighting against ourselves instead of working with ourselves.
I know. You're right. It's like we're constantly trying to fit ourselves into some external mold of what we think we should be or how we should behave. And in the process, we lose touch with our own inner wisdom and that natural flow of well-being.
So how do we get back to that natural flow? How do we start trusting our bodies and working with them instead of against them?
Well, one important step is to start recognizing that well-being is our natural state. It's not something we need to achieve or earn. It's already within us. It's about aligning with source energy and trusting our body's innate intelligence.
I remember you mentioned this idea of the vortex earlier. Could you explain that a bit more? It sounds pretty mysterious.
The vortex is essentially a metaphor for that state of alignment with source energy where well-being just flows effortlessly.
Okay.
It's like being in the vibrational sweet spot where everything just seems to click into place.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But how do we actually get into the vortex? Is there a secret password or a special handshake?
Well, remember that analogy of the cork bobbing back up to the surface of the water.
Yeah.
It's constantly being drawn back to alignment with source energy in the same way we're constantly being guided towards the vortex.
Mm.
It's about getting out of our own way and allowing ourselves to be drawn in.
That sounds great in theory, but I think we all know how easy it is to get caught up in those negative thoughts and limiting beliefs that can kind of pull us out of alignment.
You're right. Those wonky calibrations can be pretty persistent.
Mm.
But the more we practice aligning with source energy,
Yeah.
the easier it becomes to recognize when we are out of alignment and gently guide ourselves back.
So it's a process of fine-tuning our internal compass.
Exactly. And one of the most powerful tools we have for fine-tuning our compass is meditation.
I've heard a lot about the benefits of meditation, but I've always struggled to make it a consistent practice. It seems like my mind is always racing, especially when I'm trying to quiet it down.
It's totally normal for our minds to wander, especially when we are first starting out. Remember what Abraham Hicks says, it's not about emptying our minds completely,
Right.
but rather focusing our attention on something that feels good, something that brings us a sense of peace and ease.
So instead of getting frustrated with myself for having thoughts, I can just gently redirect my attention back to my breath or to a calming image.
Exactly. It's like training a puppy.
Yeah.
You wouldn't scold the puppy for getting distracted.
Right.
You would just gently guide it back to where you want it to be.
I like that analogy. It takes a lot of the pressure off. It's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent and gentle with ourselves.
Exactly. And the more we practice, the more natural it becomes to shift our focus and align with source energy.
This all makes so much sense, but I have to admit, I still have some doubts. You know, what about those times when we're facing real challenges, like when our bodies aren't feeling well? It's hard to focus on well-being when you are in pain or discomfort.
That's a really important point, and it's something that Abraham Hicks addresses directly in their teachings.
Huh.
They don't suggest that we ignore our physical experiences or pretend that everything is always rosy.
Okay.
In fact, they emphasize that our bodies are constantly giving us messages.
So it's not about denying or minimizing those messages.
Not at all. It's about recognizing those messages as indicators, as signals that something might be out of alignment, and then instead of getting lost in the negativity of those messages,
Right.
we can choose to shift our vibration to focus on a more empowering perspective.
So instead of dwelling on, I feel sick, we might say, my body is giving me a signal that something's out of balance, but I trust its innate wisdom to guide me back to well-being.
Exactly. It's about finding that more empowering perspective, one that allows us to tap into our inner strength and connect with the well-being that is always available to us.
I'm starting to see how this perspective can be so transformative. It's not about denying or ignoring our challenges, but rather approaching them from a place of empowerment and trust.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. It's about consistently choosing thoughts and actions that are in alignment with well-being.
So it's a practice like anything else worth cultivating, and it sounds like that practice involves a lot of self-compassion and celebrating even the smallest wins.
Absolutely. You are essentially rewiring your brain, changing those deeply ingrained patterns of thinking. Celebrate every step in the right direction.
It's like we are becoming our own cheerleaders on this journey to well-being, and that feels so much more fun than the typical shoulds and musts we often hear.
Fun is a key ingredient here. Remember, Abraham Hicks emphasizes that well-being is about ease and flow. It's not about deprivation or struggle. It's about aligning with the joy of who you truly are.
That's such a powerful message, and it feels like we are just scratching the surface of what's possible when we embrace this perspective.
There's still so much more to explore. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve into some even more fascinating aspects of these teachings, including the role of genetics and the power of our intentions.
It's amazing to think that well-being could be like this natural state that we're always being guided back to, like you said, like that cork bobbing in the water.
Yeah.
But if that's true, what about things like genetics? I mean, aren't we kind of predisposed to certain health conditions based on our genes?
That's a great question, and one that comes up a lot when we're talking about well-being. Abraham Hicks does acknowledge that genetics plays a role, but they really emphasize that our genes are not our destiny. It's not like a fixed blueprint that we are stuck with.
So it's not like if heart disease runs in your family, you are guaranteed to get it, too. There's more to the story.
Exactly. They use this really cool analogy of a town where the beliefs of the older generation get passed down to the younger generation, and it takes time for those old, often limiting beliefs to be kind of filtered out and replaced with newer, more expansive ones.
So it's like we inherit those beliefs about health and well-being just like we inherit our genes.
Yes. And just like we can update our beliefs, we can also influence our genetic expression. Our cells are constantly regenerating, and each new cell is an opportunity for a fresh start, a chance to align with a new set of beliefs.
Wait, so you're saying we can actually change our genetic expression through our thoughts and emotions?
That's the idea. It's about recognizing that incredible power and adaptability of our bodies. We're not just passive recipients of our genes. We have an active role to play in shaping our health and well-being.
It's like we have more control than we think. We're not just stuck with the blueprint we were given. We can actually rewrite the code through our choices.
Precisely. And that's where the power of our intentions comes in. Abraham Hicks talks a lot about how our desires are incredibly powerful. They're like rockets of energy being sent out into the universe.
So if we focus on what we want on well-being, we're sending out a powerful signal that the universe responds to. It's like we are putting in an order.
You got it.
Well,
and remember that phrase they use, vibrational escrow?
Right. It's like we're making deposits into this cosmic bank account, and the universe matches those deposits with manifestations.
Exactly. So if we're constantly worrying about getting sick or dwelling on our limitations, we're actually depositing energy into those unwanted experiences.
So even though we can't always control the circumstances we face, we can control how we respond to them, how we choose to focus our energy.
Absolutely. It's not about denying those fears or pretending that they don't exist. It's about consciously choosing to shift our focus to what we want to well-being, even when things feel really challenging.
I'm starting to see how powerful this can be. It's like we're retraining our minds to look for evidence of well-being instead of evidence of lack.
And the more we practice this, the more natural it becomes. Remember that anecdote about the woman who ate 2 full meals and dessert but stayed slender?
Yeah, because food is her friend. It all comes back to that energy of ease and flow, that trust in our bodies and the universe.
Exactly. And that energy is available to all of us, regardless of our genetics or our circumstances. It's about aligning with source energy, trusting our bodies, and choosing thoughts that feel good.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. It really feels like a completely different way of thinking about health and healing.
It is a paradigm shift. And the most exciting part is that it's a journey of self-discovery. It's about tapping into that incredible wisdom and resilience that is already within you.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is the most important thing for our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the key takeaway here is this well-being is not something you have to achieve or earn. It's your natural state. It's about aligning with source energy, trusting your body, and choosing thoughts that feel good. It's about allowing well-being to flow into your life effortlessly.
I love that. It's about letting go of that struggle, that constant striving, and embracing the ease and joy of who we truly are.
Exactly. And remember, it's a practice. Be patient with yourself, celebrate every step in the right direction, and trust that you are being guided towards a life filled with well-being.
This has been an incredible exploration, and I hope our listeners feel as inspired as I do to start applying these principles in their own lives.
We would love to hear about your experiences. Until next time, keep exploring, keep trusting, and keep allowing well-being to flow into your life.